What's going on, Corey Bly, Fantasy Football League team owners? I'm your host, The Messenger. Now, we are coming to another video here. This is not the tier list rankings, but this is a video on how to read the stat sheet. Now, as I was going over Zay's ranking last time and going through the stat sheet, I'm like, this might be some people's first time viewing the stat sheet. And even though I did break it down while doing the ranking, I felt that it would be good to break down how to view the stat sheet also, because there is a lot of information in the stat sheet, and I do want to help everybody in the league understanding stats, because it could be useful for you in helping you build your team. Now, I will be doing, so this will be part one of it. We'll probably just go over the first few tabs or first few sheets of the stat sheet just to make life easier for everybody. And if you're not in the league and you're wondering how to use the stat sheet, this will be useful for you also. In the description down below are links to the stat sheet if you want to fill out your own stat sheet. The directions will be in the folder with the stat sheet also. And for those who are waiting for the next ranking to come out, patience is on the way. I know everybody always checking for the messenger. When is the next video dropping? Calm down. All right, let's break down this stat sheet. So here we will just be going over the 2024 season stat sheet, because it'll just be easier to look at all the stats. And as you is the standing sheet, and it's simple. It's just going week by week of the standings throughout the week. Now, this stat sheet will fill up week by week whenever stats are input. So if it's week 1, none of this will be filled in for week 2 except the names. Maybe this, actually we could check right here. Yes, so just the names. So this is the 2025 stat sheet. We haven't had any stats yet, so we'll be blank, but all of these names will be here. The order of these names in the other weeks really don't matter either. It's just how it's listed right now, so don't even worry about it. In this stat sheet also, I didn't put in this one yet, so I might as well just copy this over. So here in the note, it tells you what the point ranking is. Point ranking is a ranking of a team's wins and total points. To the left of the decimal is a ranking of a team's total wins, and to the right of the decimal is a ranking of a team's total points. The lower your point ranking, the higher you are in the standings. So easy as explained. This number means your ranking on the left side, and the right is your ranking of your total points. So for example, Pape, his point ranking is 1.01. So that means he's first in the standings on the left, and on the right, he's first in points. And since he's first in points, he will have a higher ranking than everybody else who also has a 1 to the left. So everybody here who's 1-0 is technically tied first, and everybody here below is technically tied 7th. And you're like, how are they tied 7th when there's 12 people in the league? Why wouldn't they be tied like maybe 6? Well, there's 6 people above this person right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That makes him 7th. And then everybody else also have the same standing as him, which equals 7th. Right here is win percentage. I'm pretty sure everybody understands that. Right now, Pape would be 100% because he has no losses. Zay would be 0% because he has no wins. And these are color graded, green being the best, red being the worst. It goes for in these columns also. As you can see, Pape was first in points that week with a win, which is why his total points is greener than others. And Zay had the worst, why his number is red and more red than others. So by the time you get to week 14, which is the end of the regular season for us, it will look a little different. And this is a nice way of kind of checking of how the points are being spread out throughout the league and who's really above others. As you can see, Emmett was 5-9 last year, but he was worse in points. As you can see, 10, 12. Sky happened to be worse in standings, 12, but he was 8th in points. And it was really up until Vontae being the last person, and Pez was kind of got switched up. Pez was 9th in points. That's just the way it kind of worked out. Now on to the next sheet, which is playoff picture. Just like in ESPN app, I don't know what other app actually kind of show this, but it will show us the top 6 teams who will be eligible for playoff contention if the playoffs had started that week. So in week 1, this would have been what it looked like. Let's go like week 7, midway through the season. If the playoffs started in week 7, this would look like with Jamar 1 being number 1, and you got other people spread out. Raekwon was the top team, and then by the time you get to week 14, this is what the playoffs looks like. You got Jamar 2, Jamar 1, 3 seed, Josh, 4, Pape, 5, Naeem, 6, Raekwon. Now this isn't showing the playoffs of like, oh, if someone wins here, who will be next, and if someone wins here. Nope, this is just a playoff picture and what it will look like. We don't have a playoff stat sheet yet, but in the future we will get one of those operating. Now on to team stats. This is the final sheet we're going to go over, but there's a lot to go over in this stat sheet. And one more thing before I even get to that, there are people who are in the league in 2021. It might look slightly different because there's two sides, but we had conferences in the previous league. So if you're from 2021, this is what it looks like. If you're the founding five, this is what it look like. Back to the 2024 stat sheet. So as you can see, the first thing that comes up is the scoreboard, and it just shows everybody's scores throughout the weeks and whoever the opponent was. Now it doesn't show you who the exact opponent was, but if you want to look around and kind of find out, okay, who had 133.92, oh, it was Lopez. That's what you can see. And as you can see on the info on the rules to the right, if your numbers are green, that means you won that week. If your numbers are red that week, that means you lost. And if your numbers are yellow, that means you tied. And if you hover over the scoreboard on the left side where there's info, it says teams head to head, score by week. Each team will always have their score listed first in the cell from left to right, so easy explainable. So Lopez numbers will always be on this left side and the opponents will always be on the right side. Same with Pape, his numbers on the left, opponent's number on the right, and this will automatically fill up after every week. Next, we have the record, a team's win-loss tie record throughout the season. And for rules, if you're under 500, you're red. If you're at 500, you're yellow. If you're above 500, you're green. So we got Jamar 2, Raekwon, and Jamar 1. As you can see, they were never under 500 at any time this season. But for maybe somebody like Naeem, he was under 500, he was at 500, and he was above 500 to end the season. And somebody like Chris, he was never over 500 at any point during the season. Sakai, he happened to be above 500 week 1. Fortunately, he didn't finish that way. Next, win/loss/tie streak shows the streak that a team is currently on. Now, if you're on a losing streak, it's going to be red. If you're on a tie streak, it'll be yellow. If you're on a win streak, it will be green. So as you can see, the longest win streak of the regular season was actually owned by Jamar 2. He had a 7-game win streak. I think that might be the longest win streak, actually. I have to go check on that in the regular season. And as you can see, Sakai had a 7-game losing streak. Unfortunately, that's not the longest, so I don't think. Pause. Of the season, yes, but in all time, I don't think that is. Win percentage, self-explanatory again. The team's current win percentage. So everybody throughout the season, as you can see, Josh ended with a 57.14 win percentage, and that record was 8-6. As you can see, if you're below 50, red, at 50, yellow, above, green. Self-explanatory. Now we have some extra stuff here on the side, and this is lowest win percentage and highest win percentage. And as you can see, it says teams can have the same number, but it'll always list the team that comes first in the stat sheet from left to right. So Lopez didn't have the lowest win percentage that week. There were other teams that had it also, but like the instructions say, it's always going to list the first team that comes up from left to right. Same here with in week 1, Naeem has the highest win percentage. It's just he's the first person to come up during that week. But as you get later into the season, most teams won't have the same stuff. Some will, but most won't. So by the end of the season, as you can see, Jamar 2 had a 78.57 win percentage, and Zakai had a 14.29 win percentage, and nobody else has these numbers. And so you can see week by week who has some of the highest stats. Here we have weekly points. Really simple. Weekly points of each team. So it's going to show you how much points that you had each week. Over here, it says weekly average score. Another stat. This wasn't here before. Average score of all the teams in the league for that week. And then you'll have the info rules. Now, how this works is if you're green, that means your weekly score was higher than this right here, the weekly average score. If it's red, that means it was below it. And if it's yellow, that means you were actually equal to it, which is unlikely to be equal to the weekly score, but I think I've seen it one time. So as you can see, some of the teams, we'll go for Jamar, for example. He was only under the weekly average 3 times. Week 8, week 5, and week 4. Another cool thing to check when I like looking at stats is, so those 3 weeks, did Jamar lose during those weeks? And we could really find that out. Week 4, Jamar lost. Week 5, Jamar lost. Week 8, Jamar actually won. Not by a large margin though, but he still won regardless. So it's kind of cool to see these things and put your stats up against other people's, really yourself if you're really just worried about yourself. Sometimes teams will put up a lot. They might put up a lot of points. They'll be over the weekly average, but still lose. It could happen. Like here, Zay, for example. He was under the weekly average almost every fucking week. That's nasty work. Except week 12. Did he win week 12? You can go find that out by clicking right here. No. So the only week he was over the average, he lost. But he does have wins though. And as you can see over here, you have the person with the lowest weekly points and the person with the highest weekly weekly points. We go over a little bit to see, and then over here also just a total combined weekly points of everybody in the league. So how many points were people putting up that week? And then, like I said, this is just the average of this, to be honest. Also, well, average of all these, but this is a total of all these during each week, and you can kind of see like how many times a person might be over here. Like, damn, you had the lowest weekly points how many times? So last season, Pez, his name was listed 4 times, so 4 times Pez had the lowest weekly points. And here on the right side, we have Pape, who was there 4 times, highest weekly points. When you're looking at this stat sheet, there's a lot you can look at, and there's a lot of information in this stat sheet that I feel like most people, to be honest, I really feel like everybody in the league should be taking advantage of this. If you want to try to get yourself better at fantasy, there's a lot of information in here, you guys. Total points, self-explanatory. Also, it's just your total points week by week throughout the season. So let's say in week 2, Sakai, he had 281 points. By week 9, he had 1,200 points, a little over 1,200. And it just shows you how many points you get throughout each week, accumulating up. And the colors here will match the scoring average, and we'll get to that really soon. And then the total point average is just kind of self-explanatory. Also, the average score of all teams in the league for the season, and it's talking about total points. And here, as you can see, it's the same as OTPA. And what is OTPA? That is your opponent's total point average, which we'll get to also, because everybody's going to put up the same numbers. So if everybody here scored the average of 134.44 points, that means that your opponents did also. If you're red, below average. Yellow, equal to average. Green, above average. You know, I think we got the point of this now. And as you can see, through 10 weeks, Isaiah was last in scoring. Every one of those, he had him. Zay was doing that. And then Emmett took over and went to finish the season week and finished with 1,700 points. And as you can see, this one was really just decided between 3 people, Pape, Jamar, and the other Jamar. And it's just a total combined points of all, this should say 12 teams throughout the season. And here's your scoring average. And like I said, all these numbers, colors are going to match your total points also. Remember, this is the average, this is the total, and it should line up correctly. Here on the left, simple explanation. How many points a team averages a week throughout the season. Each week, your average is added to your previous week, and the sum of those numbers is divided by the current week number. That's how that's calculated, just for those who were curious. As you can see, these numbers are the same. Well, they're not the same numbers, but the names match up each week. Now here we get into some more advanced stats. Not too advanced, it's just we're looking at other stuff here now. Right here is your weekly win total. How many points a team scores in a win against their opponent for the week. So if you win, your numbers will automatically appear here. If you don't, you'll see this little hyphen, a black hyphen there. That hyphen means you did not win that week. Now, what do we know about green numbers? That means you're above the average. What do you know about red numbers? That means you're below the average. The average of what? The average of this number right here. The average win score for the week was 139.67. What is the average win score? The average score of all teams that won during that week. So, for example, Jamar won. Jamar put up 128.14 points that week. But this was a win. It just happened to be below the 139.67 points. So, was this a good win? It depends on if the other team didn't put up a lot of points. But this can be considered a bad win because he put up under the average. But is there really such thing as a bad win if you win? It's up for debate. So, here are some other stats that we could also look at also. We have Sakai. He had 2 wins this season. Zay, what is this? 6 wins this season. As you can see, they have no green numbers. That means in all of their wins were never above the weekly win score. As you can see, Sakai put up 131.6 points in his win. Average win score that week was 145.1. As you can see here, Jamar, he had 5 wins that were all under the average win score that week, but he had 9 total. Now, do these matter? It depends. Jamar won the league, so did it really matter to him? No. Useful things to look at about your team. What do you know about your team? Are you a good winner or are you a bad winner? Over here, you got some more of these stats again. Who was the lowest person for the week in a win? Who was the highest person? As you can see, Pape, his name was mentioned 4 times. Jamar right under him with 3. On the left, who do you have bad winners as? See Jamar's name twice. We see Emma's name twice. Chris' name 3 times actually. So Chris is one of the bad winners. Chris also didn't make the playoff. You also see Zay's name over here, Vontae's name also. So it looks like most of the names that are usually listed over here that are winning winning, they're not making playoffs. Just an observation. And over here, you have the winning average. How many points a team averages in a win? So these numbers right here are just the averages of your score here. So as you can see, Sakai only had 2 wins, and his first win was 117.98 until he gets his second win right here in week 7 with 131.6, and his win average is 124.79 for the season. Sakai did end up finishing with the lowest win average at 124.79. You had Josh with the highest win average at 161.52. Josh had 8 wins that season, so that means when Josh was winning, he was really winning like that. And here's another observation. We had 6 teams with a win average that's over the average winner score throughout the season. Lopez happened to be one of the teams, but he didn't make the playoffs. Now Raekwon, he was under it, but he made the playoffs though. And that 212 points during that last week really did help you, man. I can't even lie. That's an impressive number, and I think that's the highest number all time. Or second. One of the two. Now here we have the weekly loss total. The weekly loss total is just the opposite of the weekly win total. It's just showing your losses now. What do we know about red? Under. What do we know about green? Over. So usually teams with red, that means when you're in a red that you're really losing. If you happen to be green, it's most likely a tough loss and it's an unfortunate loss. As you can see right here, Naeem, he put up 155 and a loss. Now that 155 that's a good number right there. That 155 came during week 8. That could have got him a win. The weekly win score was 155.06. Actually, no, it was still below. I mean, to be honest, depending on who he was going against, it could have got him a win. Scott put up 164 and a loss also. It's tough. I mean, this was the highest loss week right here. 137 average loss score. Yikes. Raekwon, 138 in a loss. That's tough. So some teams, like Sakai, he was a good loser. And I don't mean that in a negative way. And I'll show you, just give me a second. I just want to show off the highest and lowest teams. As you can see, Sakai's name is listed here a lot. Really, his name is listed the most, 5 times, but 3 on this side. So why did I say Sakai's a good loser? Sakai put up 134.33 points in his losses, which was almost the second highest after Jamar. Jamar was also a good loser. Jamar only had 4 losses. But Sakai had 12 losses. Sakai had 12 losses and was still over the average. As you can see, Sakai is putting up a lot of green numbers in his losses. 164 in a loss, 163 in a loss, 142 in a loss, 140 in a loss, 158 in a loss, 142 in a loss. Like, these could win teams games. Like, but it's just unfortunate depending on who his matchup was that week, or maybe just he was starting some of the wrong people. Like that time he started somebody else over Taysom Hill, and Taysom Hill put up like 40 points on his bench. Very unfortunate game. And it was against Josh that week too, if I'm not mistaken. We'll just go look. I think it was this week right here. Sky put up 158 in a loss to Josh. Unfortunate. Here, where all these hyphens are, is your weekly tie total. This will only show up if you have ties. Same way something only shows up if you have losses. We don't have a lot of ties in league history. They've only happened twice. One with Bruce and Emmett. Second with Sakai and Naeem. And what will that look like? This is what it will look like in a tie. As you can see here, Emmett's name comes up twice. Remember, it's from left to right. So if his name shows up first, it's going to be there. Now, if 2 teams happen to tie during the same week, it will be different. You'll probably see 2 different names. Not probably, you would. And then you have the tie average here. So this will look like if you have a tie. We really don't see ties anymore because of the decimals that we have. First 2 seasons, we weren't doing decimals, but now we are. Now here is the opponent weekly points. The amount of points the team's opponent scores on them during the week. Now, as you can see, these numbers are pink and blue. Why? The reason why they're pink and blue is to symbolize that it's not really good or bad. It's just higher or lower. So blue kinda stands for cold, so that means under the average. Pink, it's a warmer tone, so that means you're above the average. Now I could have did orange, but I think orange and red are really similar, right next to each other on the color wheel. So I chose pink, and this kind of candy pink color because it's more distinctive than red. So as you can see, opponent's weekly points. It just shows you how many points your opponent is putting up on you during these weeks. So as you can see, week 1 for Naeem, he had 133.92 dropped on him, and that was below the weekly average. Remember, this is the same score right here as the weekly average score. So this was actually from Lopez, 133.92. That's below the 134.44. Lopez, he had 151 dropped on him, which is above the 134.44. And this just shows you the highest and lowest opponent weekly points. And it shows your opponent's total points. So if you're blue, that means your opponents really weren't putting up points on you like that throughout most of the season. As you can see, Jamar wasn't getting a lot of points dropped on him. Raekwon Raekwon, Jamar again, Emmett, Zay, Josh. It was really split down the line. But here are some correlations also we can make. For the teams who made the playoffs, how many points were really going to put up on you? Jamar made the playoffs. Raekwon made the playoffs. They were both under the 1932. Jamar made the playoffs. Josh also made the playoffs. Pape made the playoffs. So that's 5 teams that made the playoffs who all have under. Now, you really have to go year by year and really check if playoff teams are not getting a lot of points dropped up on them. It's a possibility. There could be a correlation, but this right here is just an observation. The only team that made the playoffs with his opponent's total points being above was Naeem. Naeem, for a majority of the season, up until week 13 from week 6, he was having the most points dropped up on him. Sakai took over for the last week of the season. Now, what we don't really know about this, though, is that these aren't ranked. We will get this at some point during the future to see where each team lined up in 1 through 12. So, as you can see here, this team is the number 1 points dropped up on them. This is the number 12 team that had points dropped up on them. But we don't have anything from 2 to 11. So we will get that in the future to see where everybody really kind of stood at. And then your opponent's average, how many points your points are averaging on you, it's going to be the same as this in colors. Self-explanatory, just how we do the other points. As you can see, Naeem's name comes up a lot here. Now, you have opponent's weekly loss total. What does this mean? How many points your opponent scores in their loss against you. So now, a little more advanced stuff. This is not just your opponent's points. This is your opponent's points in their losses. That's against their team. So as you can see, we'll go to Naeem again. When his opponents were losing against him, they were putting up above the average of the opponent weekly loss total. What does pink mean? Above. What does blue mean? Below. So when teams are really losing against Naeem, they were giving him a tough fight. That's an observation to make. As you can see for Zay, when teams lost against him, they really kind of sucked that week. And over here, it's just the opponent's loss average. So you'll get your average from all these points over here. As you see, Naeem's team, his opponents were averaging the most against him in losses. They were averaging 136.04. So Naeem was over there fighting for his life, basically trying to win games. Sakai's opponents in losses against him, they were losing. And Sakai's team, remember, was 2-12 that season, but in those 2 wins that he had, that means his opponents lost twice to him, they were losing bad. Over here in the paint, you can kind of see who was having tough times in their wins. Naeem was having tough times. Looks like Lopez could have been. Pabe might have been also. There's also depends on how many points they're scoring also. But what we do know about Naeem's team is that he had more points dropped on him than he had points scored. But Naeem was still above the points average and made the playoffs. It was just a tough schedule. Maybe it was scripted that way. Next, we have opponent's weekly win total. How many points your opponent scores in their win against you. So as you can see, if it's pink, that means it's above. If it's blue, that means it's below. In Jamar's 3 losses, his opponents put up a lot of points on him. I'm not even gonna lie. Tough losses. So his opponents dropped 143 in their win, 166 in their win, and 180 in their win. Now, if teams are putting up blue numbers, I will go over here for Emmett. That means when they're winning, they were below the weekly average that week, weekly win total average. If your team is putting up a lot of blue against you, that kind of means that your team really isn't that good because you're losing to a team that's below the average. So, for example, what does this 164 mean? It means weekly average opponent win total. So, if I drag all these numbers right here, click right here, shows me the average, 164.53. So these are all the opponent's wins for that week. They averaged 164.53. Emmett, for example, his opponent put up 144 on him. That was below the 164 average. Why is this average so high? It's really because Sakai and Lopez's opponents. I know Raekwon dropped 212 on him, damn near 213. I'm not exactly sure who dropped the 176 on Sakai, but it was a lot though. And that's kind of, and then you have Josh at 185. So it's really these scores bringing it up a lot. But this was just a high scoring week. It was a good way to end the regular season. And then you have the averages right here. So as you can see, when Jamar opponents really won on him, they were winning. They put up 163 on Jamar. Emmett, his opponents really weren't putting up a lot of points on him in his wins, but that didn't stop Emmett from losing. Bench points, these is kind of self-explanatory how many points your bench is putting up. Blue is below the average, pink is above. Like I said, it's really not a good or bad thing. It's kind of showing you just how many points might have been left up on your bench. Maybe you started everybody the right week and you still have 46 points on your bench. It just happens. So it's like, it's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It can be a good or bad thing if you're not leaving or leaving points up on the bench, but this really doesn't tell you that. It just kind of shows you how many points that you're leaving on a bench each week. Maybe it's not leaving, just how many points are on your bench that week. SB points. What is SB points? Starter and bench points combined. Like I said, it's not good, it's not bad. It's just showing you how many total points your whole team scored, including your bench. But I will say, if you are blue a lot, that's kind of bad though. I ain't even gonna lie, because your starter and bench points is really that low. Like here, 132.84 from Lopez's bench and starting that week. week. That's low. 106 from Pape, that's really low. Like, that means your starters wasn't doing that much either. Look at Pape's bench put up 3.9 that week. So that means he put up like 103, maybe 102 that week. Now here, we have RVL weekly. What does that mean? Record versus league weekly. And what is that? What your weekly record would be if you face everyone in the league during the week instead of a head-to-head matchup. / ranking your weekly points in a win-loss tie format. So, Naeem, for example. Actually, let's do somebody else, for example. Let's go Raekwon. It says that Raekwon is 8-3. And as you can see, every one of these games, it's 11 total wins, losses combined in ties. It will never be over. It will never be under 11. It will always be at 11 total. So as you can see, Raekwon would have went 8-3 this week. What does that mean? That means that he outscored 8 opponents that week and 3 opponents outscored him. Devontae, he outscored 4 opponents that week and 7 opponents outscored him. Remember, you can't outscore yourself, which is why it's showing 11, even though there's 12 people in this league. Now, if it was an 8-man, it'll show 7. If it's a 10-man, it show 9. If it's 14, it show 13. What does red mean? Below. What does green mean? Above. Yellow, that means you're right there at 500. And the team wants more greens than reds. I'll tell you that. Now, if you're 0-11 a week, that means you were bad that week and everybody outscored you. That also means you lost. There's no way you have 0 and you're winning. You could tie, but not a lot over here with this format. And now over here, you have record versus league weekly percentage. What is this? It's just what your weekly win percentage would be if you face everyone in the league during the week. So it's just your win percentage of this. Now we have record versus league weekly total. What is that? Your combined record versus league weekly record throughout the season. So how do we get here? Let's use Josh for an example. He's 11-11 week 2. So that means in week 1, as you can see, Josh went 6-5. So that means he outscored 6 opponents that week and 5 outscored him. Now he got to 11-11. So that means that during week 2, he outscored 5 opponents and 6 outscored him, as you can see. And so that will leave him at 11-11 through 2 weeks, right at 500. And as you can see, by the end of the season, you have a very large number of wins and losses. Usually, this can reflect some of the top teams and who's doing good and who's not, who might be making the playoffs, who's not. It doesn't always reflect that though, but in this case it did though. All these teams that are green ended up making the playoff. Can a team that has red still make the playoff? Yes. Can a team that has green still miss the playoffs? Yes also. How does this happen? This kind of just shows you a good overview of your matchups. Sometimes a team can have bad matchups, but your team still just puts up points. As we know, Naeem's team, he had more points scored on him than he had points scored, but he was still scoring a lot. So that means he was really outscoring a lot of teams in a week. He just had bad matchups sometimes, but he was still able to pull through. If we take a look back at 2023, as you can see here, Jamar 84-70. Jamar ended up missing the playoffs. He went 5-9 that season. Over here, we have Josh, who also went 5-9 that season. Josh missed the playoffs also. Maybe it was a different type of 5-9. Here, Chris was 76-78. Chris ended up making the playoffs. Like I said, you can still be under and make the playoffs. Chris just might have had good matchups that season. Jamar just could have had bad matchups that season. It happened. Total points kind of reflect this. It's not a one-to-one thing. For example, Pape has 90. He had the most. Now, Pape could have the most points total, but it's not necessarily the case though, always. But it can be. It's most likely to be, but there's a chance it could not be. Just a little fun fact here too. As you can see here, all 4 of these teams have 84-70. This is the only team that made the playoffs that year, which was Raekwon. Devontae did not make it. Zay did not make it. Jamar did not make it also. What teams made it? Naeem made it. Lopez made it. Pape made it. Raekwon, like I said, Emmett, and Chris. Now back to the 2024 season. The record versus league total percentage is just really the win percentage. How it's calculated again. Now we have another stat. A lineup point differential. What is that? The total point difference / margin between the team's starting lineup and the team's best lineup. LPD is a metric that calculates how well a team owner starts the right players. So a team owner could be considered a good coach when they have a perfect week. A perfect week is 0. The thing about having a low LPD is that teams with a worse record tend to have a lower LPD. The reason is because those team owners are not as good of a GM. A good GM will utilize the waivers and bench more than a GM who is not as good. Better teams tend to have higher scoring benches, which leads to a lower LPD. Now, a good GM can have a low LPD. It's just more likely than not. So LPD is essentially a metric tracking a team owner's combined coaching and GM skills. I hope that makes sense to everybody. So as you can see here, we have a new color, purple. Purple means perfect. So that means that you start the best lineup possible. What is the best lineup though? I know y'all see best lineup stats and all that stuff over here, but we don't need to focus on that right now. We're just focusing on best lineup. So here is everybody's lineups for the week on who they started. What is best lineups? Best lineups is if the people who are on the bench that might have had more points started. So if I go over to best lineups, this will show me the best lineups of each team each week. Your total score will change because that means there are some players that could have been started instead of this person, and it will rework people around. So if I had a better running back, maybe my flex that could have been in my RB2 spot, it will go there. If I had a running back or a tight end or a wide receiver that was somewhere else, it will go in my flex, and it'll do that automatically. I know it looks complicated, and it is, but you don't even have to worry about it, but it will calculate the best lineup possible. So if you start everybody the right week, you'll get a 0. If you don't, you'll get other numbers. So right here for Naeem, he had a green 1.4. What does that mean? Well, in this case, green actually means below, and red actually means above, because red is bad, green is good this time. So you want to be below the weekly LPD. Now, could these numbers have been pink and blue also? Yeah, they could have, but it's also a good thing. Like, it's not just like one of those things I don't really gotta worry about. It's not a high or lower thing. It can be good and it can be bad, because if you're leaving so many points up on the bench and not starting your right people, it can lead to a loss for you. So it's kind of really knowing who to start every week in the right week. So you want more greens than reds, really. This is a very broad metric, but it should be paid attention to. What is LPD percentage? It's just the percentages of these on how good you were at starting your lineup. So as you saw for Naeem, he had a 1.4 points that week, and in that week he was 99.08% close to starting his perfect lineup. Week 2, he was 100% there at starting his right lineup. Week 3, he was 88% there. So it's really about the points. Like, Naeem left 1.4 points up there to be attained, but he didn't get it, so he was 99% there. And then you'll have the average once you get down here, and it kind of shows at the end of the season on what you really had, on how good you were at starting your lineup. 2024 actually was the best year for everybody. Everybody was in the 90s except for Isaiah. So it's like, damn, a 90 is getting you under? Yeah, it just happened to be that way. Isaiah just did a bad job at starting the right people every week. And I do want to show you that, like I said, sometimes teams can have a good LPD and still not be good. So as you can see, Jamar had one of the highest LPD percentages in 2023, but Jamar did also go 5-9. So that means he could have just not had people on his bench as much. Maybe he wasn't being a good GM, or maybe he had injuries and he was just starting the best lineup available. That's to say, there's a lot of things that can go into this. Sometimes teams with low ones are just better GM sometimes. So you really got to dig deep into your own roster and your own stats to kind of see why you have a good or a bad one. Like I said, Raekwon had an 87.88. Raekwon won this year though. But as I said, like, this was a playoff team, but this was a fraud playoff team. Didn't make the playoffs, didn't make the playoffs, didn't make the playoffs also. But as you can see, made the playoffs, made the playoffs, made the playoffs. So this doesn't guarantee if you have a green you're making the playoffs and red you're missing the playoffs. There's a lot of information that you need to do when you're looking at LPD percent average. Next, we have win margin for the week. How much a team wins by for the week. Math equation, weekly win total minus opponent's weekly loss total. So as you can see right here, Raekwon, he won by 10.56 points that week, and that was above the weekly win margin average of 10.46. So teams were winning by an average of 10.46 points in week 1. Right here, Jamar in week 6 won by 66.54 points. That was above the 26.45 points that week. And the win margin average, how much teams are winning by throughout the season, and this is just the average of those, and this will show you through the season how much teams are winning by. So right here in week 7, teams are winning by a margin of 24.72. Right here, Jamar 1 was winning by 28.44 points throughout the season. Now, this is good and bad also, because as you can see over here, Naeem has a 21.29, and that means he was only winning by an average of 21.29 points per game, which is below the 26.48 points. But as you remember, Naeem, he made the playoffs. He also had more points dropped on him than he had scored, but he was putting up a lot of points though. He was above the league average. So this is good and bad also, almost just like the LPD. And the reason why it could be bad also, because maybe you're not putting up a lot of points, but you're still winning. Like Chris here in 2023, he was only winning by 10.63 points. But how many points was he putting up? How many points was his opponents putting up? So this is why you really got to start checking other stats too, because why is this number so low? Is it good low or is it bad low? Loss margin for the week, just the inverse of wins. Green, this means you're below the average. Red means you're above the average. Oh damn, Jamar beat Naeem by 66 points that week. Golly. This number over here and these numbers over here is going to be the same number as these above. Same numbers. So over here, as you can see, Naeem, he was losing by an average of 31.6 points per week. That's above the 26.48. Is it bad? Yeah. Why? Naeem's opponents were dropping a lot of points, and he had more points put upon him. There's a story to each one of these numbers. Like I said, the numbers don't lie, but the numbers don't tell you the whole story. You need to start figuring out why some of your team's number look like this. Yes, this is bad for Naeem, but was he winning? What was he doing? Is his team putting up a lot of points? So you gotta kind of find stuff out like that. As you can see, Emmett wasn't losing by that much. He didn't make the playoffs though. Same with Sakai. He didn't make the playoffs though. But why? Why is he not losing by that much? And here is just your total point margin. What is the total point margin? The point difference between a team's total points and opponent points scored on them throughout the season. So as you can see, Naeem had 19.26 points more of his opponent scoring than he had total points. It's not a crazy number, but usually teams who are in green end up making the playoffs. Playoff team, playoff team, playoff team, playoff team, another playoff team. This was the playoff team also. Vontae had a lower one than Naeem. It's not a playoff team. You're like, damn, how did he have a low one and not make the playoffs? Well, it depends on how many points he put up and how many points he got put up on him. It's not the first time that's happened in history where a team with a negative total point margin made the playoffs. Chris was one of them also. He had a negative 96, but still made the playoffs. Chris made the playoffs that year. This year had a positive one. He missed the playoffs. Emmett had a low one. He made the playoffs. Raekwon, he made the playoffs. Mar had a negative. He missed the playoffs. Pape made the playoffs. Josh missed. Lopez had a high one, made the playoffs. So it's not just because you have a positive one doesn't mean you're making it. Just because you have a negative doesn't mean you're missing it. It's just sometimes that's how the cookie crumbles. And then that is the end of the team stats and stat sheet. This is what we'll be finishing up with in part 1. Part 2, we'll probably just go over player stats because there's a lot to go over there also. Just how there's a lot to go over in here. I already put a lot up on you guys today in terms of info. Hopefully use this to your best ability. So please use this. I can't force you to use it, but I hope you do use it. It will also give stuff for people to talk about in a group chat. Especially for the 2025 season, we got new members and stuff. We got a new tier list dropping soon. Till next time, this is the Messenger signing off.